Our story begins in New York in 1932 with a man named Michael Malloy. Not much was known about Malloy except for the following. He was around 60 years old, homeless, an alcoholic, Irish, and a former firefighter. So one day, a few guys were hanging out in the local speakeasy, including Tony Marino, the owner of the joint, and a couple of regulars by the names of Francis Pasqua and Daniel Kreisberg. And who else stumbles in but old Dusty McGee looking to get his morning fix? Marino's like, I've had it up to here with that Michael Malloy character. He never pays his tabs, smells like the crevice behind an unwashed ear, harasses my clientele. Did you know the Hindenburg disaster didn't actually happen? Yeah, it was an inside job by the government to make Big Zeppelin look bad. Personally, I'm glad. One less industry controlled by the fucking Krauts.
The Hindenburg disaster doesn't happen for another 5 years, dumbass.
Ah, bite me. And every day, he ends up like that. So Pasqua's like, yikes, seems like quite the dilemma on your hands. Lucky for you, I've come up with the perfect solution. Let me hear it. I say we deploy a ploy to destroy that unemployed Malloy. Shut up. Anyway, go on. I'll take out a life insurance policy on him. Then we let him drink as much as he wants. Obviously he's gonna kick it. I mean, look at him. No self-control. See that? He just drew from the stockpile while there's still moves to be made on the tableau.
Oh, I like that joke.
Then, once he's dead, we get all the money for ourselves. Win-win. The first part of the plan went through without a hitch. Pasqua took out not one, but 3 policies on Malloy's life, with Joseph Murphy, a bartender at Marino's, posing as Malloy's brother and being named as the sole beneficiary. In total, the group stood to gain $3,576, which is like 66 grand in today's money. With all that in place, they begin the second part of the plan. Hey, Malloy. Good to see you, man. Say, what happened to your arm? Yeah, the other day I got in a fight with a goose. Got bit pretty bad. Been leaking pus for about a week now. But hey, I got the breadcrumbs. Okay, well anyway, guess what? Your tab now has unlimited credit. Oh, cool. Well, what's that mean? It means you can drink as much as you want and we can't stop you. Bet. Naturally, he orders shot after shot and the gang happily complies. It gets to the point where Malloy's drinking way more than should be humanly possible, but instead of dropping dead or passing out, after a while he's just like, "Aight. See ya." Within 24 hours, he's back at it, giving his liver the equivalent of a Tyson uppercut and being no worse for wear. This went on for a few days before the boys were like, alright, we need to up the ante here, and decided to replace Malloy's typical shots with wood alcohol, otherwise known as methanol. Keep in mind, as little as 4% methanol by volume is enough to make a moonshiner go blind, and just 2 shots of the pure stuff should be able to kill a man. But Malloy slammed back just as much as he normally would, totally none the wiser, and was like, still see ya. Anyway, see ya. They tried again for a few more nights, he was fine. Soaked some expired oysters in wood alcohol and fed them to him, he was fine. They gave him a sandwich made from rotten sardines and carpet tacks. Motherfucker asks for another. They were like, alright, this man's got a lead belly, there's gotta be something else we can do. So one day after he passed out, they drove him half a mile to the park, tossed him out into the snow, took off his shirt, and soaked his head and chest in water. They drive away thinking they've finally done it, but when Marino clocked in at the speakeasy the next day, Malloy's already there, just hanging out, barely even sniffling. Finally they just said fuck it, ran the guy down with their buddy's cab, and backed over him again for good measure. For once, Malloy didn't show up the next day. The gang was cautiously optimistic. After all, there are 60-year-olds who bite the dust just from one wrong step in the shower, let alone the force of a half-ton of steel going 50 miles an hour. They called all the local hospitals and morgues in an attempt to find where he ended up, but they couldn't get any useful information from anyone. Lo and behold, 5 days later, the guy limps his way on in once again, with a mighty thirst and little memory of the incident. The gang debated just icing some other random drunkard, cause this one's the fucking juggernaut apparently. But they decided to try one more thing before calling it quits. After Malloy went through his usual blackout routine, they took him up to Murphy's room, stuck a gas line in his mouth, wrapped a towel around his face, and turned it on. Within an hour, Malloy finally stopped breathing. After countless attempts on his life, at long last, they were successful. However, as you might have realized, the final method of murder was a far cry from the simple elegance of the original plan, which is something they never really thought about until it was too late. Hey guys, what's poppin'? My brother, Michael Malloy, is dead. Can I have money now? Oh dear, I'm so sorry. What happened? What? Why did the man die? Pneumonia? I see. And when can we see the body exactly? So, after a quick medical examination, the men were convicted of first-degree murder and attempted fraud, and subsequently sentenced to death by electric chair. And while the executioner flipped the switch, Malloy's ghost sat in the corner, chowing down on some antifreeze and sardine soles, just laughing his ass.
Hey, little Jimmy.
Yeah, what's up?
Do you like Pirates of the Caribbean?
Yeah, it's alright.
So do you think it'd be fun to be a pirate?
Yeah?
Well, guess what? You couldn't be more wrong.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah, I know.
At some point, every kid has dreamed about being a swashbuckling, corn-shuckling, wife-cuckling, cocksuckling pirate, but trust me when I say, it was really not all it's cracked up to be. First, we'll talk about the food. So one staple of the pirate diet was salted meat, usually wild oxen or pork. And I love jerky as much as the next guy, but this wasn't like a bag of Jack Links. In fact, it was probably closer in texture to your shoes than any meat you've ever eaten. In those days, you couldn't just snap into a Slim Jim. That's a modern luxury that we take for granted. Back then, the slogan was, gnaw on a Slim Jim for minutes on end, grinding it between your molars while the gallons of salt turn your mouth into a desert until the mangled hunk of flesh in your mouth is just soft enough to be shoved down your greasy fucking pirate throat without tearing a hole. Another essential food item was known as hardtack. This was essentially just flour and water baked into a cracker-like brick. Beyond the fact that it was totally flavorless, hardtack was also extremely dense, to the point where pirates would often have to slam their fists down on it in order to break it into pieces small enough to fit in their mouth. As long as it was kept dry, hardtack almost never spoiled, although it often became infested with weevils.
Excuse me, sir? I'm a vegan, so can I have a new piece? One without any of Mother Nature's beautiful creatures in it? Thanks. Wait a minute, is this gluten-free?
This better be hemp rope. Nah, but the weevils didn't make you sick or change the taste all that much, so, and this is true, the crew would just eat it in the dark, so that way they couldn't tell if they were eating a normal chunk or a weevily one. Then there's the crowding. So pirate ships typically packed in as many crew members as possible, because more pirates means more manpower when you go to board an enemy ship. Of course, the downside to that is that you're basically like a bunch of hairy, unwashed sardines. Let me illustrate what a typical night below deck was like. So you're sprawled out on the damp, musty wood floor. Everything's pitch black, you can't see a thing. The smell of the filth and the mold forces you to only breathe through your mouth. Suddenly, your left hand feels wet. Probably just seawater leaking through the hull. You sniff your hand, nope. No, that's piss. You feel something furry rub up against your elbow. It was either the body of a diseased rat or the beard of your diseased crewmate. Either way, that's probably where the piss came from. Some guy's moaning loudly in the next room. Hopefully he's just jerking off, because if he's dying, that's one more body to deal with in the morning. Rinse and repeat for 8 hours, and then it's daytime. The poor diet and cramped conditions led to disease being a huge problem aboard pirate ships. The most well-known of these diseases is scurvy, where you don't get enough vitamin C. When scurvy first begins, you just kind of feel tired all the time, no big deal. Then you get weird spots on your skin and your gums start bleeding. This progresses until all your teeth fall out and all of your body's mucous membranes start gushing blood and pus, causing you to die. So that's a lot of fun. There were tons of other diseases too, I won't go through them all, but here's a few honorable mentions. Also, some people say that alcoholism is a disease. I might just be disturbed, but that's one sickness I could definitely get down with. If it is a disease, then yeah, just about every pirate had this one. If anything though, I'd call that one of the few upsides of pirate life. Finally, there's the combat. So you've gone through all these disgusting, horrible living conditions, but at least you can enjoy the thrill of battle, right? Swinging from rope to rope, sword in your mouth, long, intense saber duels, that kind of thing. But that's typically not how it went down. For one thing, when pirates boarded a ship, 9 times out of 10, they'd just surrender immediately. Because what are a bunch of well-groomed merchants going to do against a horde of disgusting barbarians? If the defending ship did decide to fight back though, the resulting brawl wouldn't be anything like the movies. It'd be way worse, like immediate R rating. Because pirates rely a lot on brutality, both because they don't have much real training, and because it scares the shit out of people. If you were a deckhand on an invaded ship and you were stupid enough to fight back, you wouldn't be dancing around doing flips and shit. None of that. Instead, they'd probably shoot you in the stomach with a flintlock pistol, kick you to the ground, chop off your shoulder blade with a hand axe, gouge out your eyes with a marlin spike, wind your intestines around the prow, and then toss your twitching body overboard. And that's only a slight exaggeration. Honestly, if Jack Sparrow got attacked by actual pirates, he wouldn't last a second. It's kinda like a used car salesman going to prison, like, I'll be fine. If anybody tries intimidating me, I can get out of it with my quick wit and charming personality. Boy, you look real pretty from behind. Oh wow, When things evolve, it's almost always for the better. After all, the reason genes get passed down is because of the fact that they help the organism survive. Occasionally, though, adaptations that might help an animal in general can become huge drawbacks in other ways. Today, we're going to talk about some inherited traits that can end up screwing certain animals over if they're not careful. First is sloths. So, evolutionarily, life has found two distinct methods to handling survival on land. You got the plants and the fungi who just kind of hang out, and then you got the animals who actually, do things. The sloth is the one member of the animal kingdom who was brave enough to say, alright, I made the wrong choice here. This whole mobility thing, way overrated, so you know what, fuck it, I'm changing teams. The sloth's sedentary lifestyle is made possible by the fact that the creature has the metabolism of the average college kid, sleeping 16 hours a day and only crapping like once a week. However, while this lifestyle is easily sustained on a diet of Hot Pockets and alcohol, it doesn't work as well when you eat nothing but leaves, which provide very little energy relative to volume. Because of this, you can have sloths who straight up kick the bucket just from being too full. Their sad, slow sloth stomachs spend so much energy over so much time trying to digest the matter, that by the time they're able to start absorbing energy, they've already fallen out of the tree dead from exhaustion. I learned about this next thing from my Uncle Harvey back when I was 8. He said to me, "Hey Sammy, did you know sharks die if they stop swimming?" At first I was skeptical, because this was the same man that told me that the squirrel on the road was just taking a nap. Several firm prods with a stick proved to me otherwise, so by this point in time, I figured Uncle Harvey just had a generally poor grasp on the concept of death. Apparently though, he was right about the first thing. Some species of sharks, such as great whites and whale sharks, need to constantly move forward in order to push new water into their mouths and through their gills so that they don't suffocate. It's kinda like when you were a kid and you had to keep running to keep the kite in the air, only instead of a kite, it's your respiratory system, and instead of the kite falling down, you would choke to death on your own deflated organs. Anyway, this method of breathing is known as ram ventilation. Following this logic, one would think that rams would then breathe through something called shark ventilation, but no, apparently they just breathe like everybody else. Next we have ferrets. So in some cultures, ferrets are referred to as polecats, and there are two main theories as to why that is. Some biologists believe that the name is based on the fact that ferrets are an evolutionary hybrid of the pole and the cat, as evidenced by their shape and features. However, others believe that the name is actually an outdated piece of Nazi propaganda, designed to show that Polish people are so dumb they don't know what a cat looks like. Nah, I'm just fucking with you guys. They're actually called polecats because of the old French word pole, meaning chicken, which comes from the fact that these guys would always break into farmers' hen houses back in the day. Back to the matter at hand, though, there is one critical difference between ferrets and cats. When a cat eats some weird household item, it can always just vomit or crap it out, problem solved. However, things get a little more complicated when your intestines are the size of shoelaces and your body is shaped like a sideways question mark. In fact, ferrets are probably the easiest to clog animals in the world. They can get blocked up and potentially die just from a few of its own hairs or a cherry pit or something getting lodged in their intestines. And it takes more than just a pipe cleaner to fix that kind of issue. Most ferret parents have to take their pet to the hospital in the event of a blockage, in order to have the obstruction removed through surgery. So unless you want to pay thousands of dollars in vet bills, make sure to keep an eye on your ferret so it doesn't end up killing itself on something random.
How it feels to chew 5-gum.
Help! I can't shit no more!
5-gum. Stimulate your ferrets.
Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Sam. When I was around 11. One day, I was just walking through the woods with my dog, not a care in the world, when I see this guy approaching from the other end. He was all by himself, and he had a football. And every now and then, he would just toss the football up in the air, catch it, and then keep walking. When I walked past him, he muttered something along the lines of, "Hey kid, you want some football?" I assume he was propositioning me to a game of catch. Or maybe he just didn't like that football very much, I'm not quite sure. But between this guy's strange nature and the fact that he was 17 and I was around 11, I turned him down. I took the dog home, and later that day, me and my friend were back at the woods, just hitting shit with sticks, I guess. I don't know, whatever kids do. We were mostly chilling in the same place, and a little ways in, I see the guy walk past again. I think it's a bit strange, but as he turns the corner, I neglect to mention anything to my friend about my previous encounter. Around 2 minutes later, I hear some grown man shouting angrily, and my friend and I turn to look. Somehow, we were so engrossed in our nothing we were doing, that we somehow failed to notice the giant plumes of smoke rising up from where that guy turned the corner. I'm talking huge, like if a member of the Vape Nation happened to see these clouds, he'd probably go into diabetic shock.
The shouts were coming from our neighbor, whose house bordered on the woods, and he must have spotted the smoke before we did. So he's shouting things along the lines of,
What the fuck do you think you're doing? I'm gonna call the fucking cops on you. What is this?
That's when the guy goes fucking ballistic.
No, please, I don't want to go to jail. It was an accident.
And a few high-pitched screeches which I don't think I'm able to replicate. My friend and I walk over to get a closer look. We see the guy standing on the edge of this huge ground fire. I'm talking at least 10 meters in diameter. Pitch black grass, smoke rising up, flames still around the edges. Now this guy must have been like a Boy Scout or something, because like I said, it was about a minute and a half between him turning the corner and hearing the guy shouting. Maybe the football was just a propane tank he painted brown. Could have been a pyromancer for all I know. It was about that time that my friend and I realized that, as two young hip delinquents, it was not in our best interest to be standing in the near vicinity of a forest fire. So we skedaddled. As we heard sirens approach in the distance, I couldn't help but wonder what this guy's motive was. A few days later, I found out the guy lived somewhat nearby, and that he had mild autism. Yeah. That cleared a good bit up for me, because I have a couple friends on the spectrum, and they're good people, but sometimes they just do things. Nowhere near full-blown arson, mind you, more just along the lines of screaming fuck at the teacher and then walking out in the middle of class. But you get the idea. So the moral of the story here, kids, is that if somebody wants to play catch with you, you let them, or else they might unleash the fucking inferno.
The human spirit is a very powerful thing. With the right temperament, it can allow us to survive things you wouldn't believe. However, some people are stronger than others. For example, I've never so much as broken a bone in my life. Haven't been hospitalized since that first time 20 years ago. So I'm like 90% certain if I'm ever forced to dance with death, my soul's pussying out to the great beyond first thing. On the other end of the spectrum, you got guys like Phineas Gage. Gage was a 25-year-old railroad worker in mid-19th century Vermont. He and his crew were busy gang blasting rock to prepare the roadbed for a newly planned route. This involves a big hole being drilled into the ground, filled with gunpowder, and packed down using a tamping iron. Well, being the gentleman and scholar that he is, Gage decides to lean forward and look directly into the hole, right? Now, the first rule of gun safety is to never look down the front of a gun. Everyone knows that. Gage basically just turned the earth into a gun and decided to put his head right in front of its gaping barrel, and wouldn't you know it, the powder goes off. The tamping iron shoots up into his cheek, moseys right on through his frickin' brain, and goes soaring out the other side, landing 80 feet away, all smeared with blood and thought juice. Now, by and large, Gage should have dropped dead immediately and been thrown into a ravine for his blatant disregard for OSHA regulations, and that would have been the end of it. But I guess Shiva Gautama Christ-chan, the one true god, decided Gage still had unfinished business down here on Shit Outta Luck 3, because after a few minutes of twitching on the ground, he got up, looked around, and thought, well, now's a good time as any for my yearly checkup. According to the doctor he went to, while Gage was retelling the story of what happened, he suddenly started vomiting all over the place, the effort of which, and I quote, pushed out about half a teacupful of the brain, which fell upon the floor. He didn't say what they did with it after. I'm picturing his dog just running over and immediately scarfing it down, then being plagued with the memories of a human railroad worker for the rest of his life. In the months following, Gage made a near complete recovery, physically anyway. He did lose a bit of his mind, which caused him to lose his mind a bit. Whereas Gage was once an upstanding, hardworking citizen, his untimely brain blast transformed him into an angry, incoherent drunkard, mumbling, quote, the grossest profanity whenever he deemed fit, and showing little to no regard for human life whatsoever. Naturally, he was fired from his job at the railroad, so Gage ended up wandering the earth, earning money any way he could. For a while, he hung out at Barnum's American Museum in New York City, basically making an exhibit of himself, standing there with the tamping iron like, hi, this went through my brain. Bye! He later had a stint as a farmhand in California and a stagecoach driver in Chile, which I don't know who let the guy with severe brain trauma and no depth perception drive a vehicle, but whatever. Over time, he actually became a lot more functional until finally, 10 years later, when his brain remembered, oh yeah, I shouldn't exist, leading to Gage having a bunch of seizures and dying at age 36. A similar story happened with one Ron Hunt in 2003. He was an American construction worker who was drilling a hole above his head when the ladder he was standing on decided to give way, leading to Hunt landing face first on a 1.5-inch auger drill bit. The drill went straight through his left eye and out the back of his skull. To give you a reference of what 1.5 inches of drill looks like, here's the actual x-ray that doctors took when Hunt arrived at the hospital. Miraculously, the drill ended up just kind of pushing his brain out of the way, leading to no cognitive impairment whatsoever. Matter of fact, Hunt was perfectly lucid while the doctors tried to figure out the best way to take the thing out of his head. Initially, they considered cutting it out, but that would have been too messy, so eventually they decided to literally just unscrew it from his head, like, alright, hold him still now. Oh, you fucking MILF. Lefty Lucy. Does that mean the top or the bottom? What? It's a rotating circle. And, okay, you hold on for 1 sec. Look, one way the top goes left, one way the bottom. So which? Clearly the one on top. Why? Tell me why. Why clearly? Same reason north is up on the map. It's just common practice. Alright, well, sorry for not subscribing to your Eurocentric propaganda, Dan, you soggy cunt. Anyway, what were we doing? If you think Hunt was just a little too lucky with his incident, don't worry. According to Snopes, he was self-employed and didn't have insurance, so while the accident didn't ruin his life, you can sleep easy knowing that hundreds of thousands of dollars of medical bills and rehabilitation costs probably did. Our next tale revolves around Greg Rasmussen, a British-born animal conservationist who was studying wildlife in Zimbabwe. One day, he got reports of a highly endangered rhino being spotted in the area, so Greg took to the skies in a single-passenger plane to track the beast. Fate was looking down at Greg that day, and after a moment, it said, "No, rhino must die." And a huge gust of wind came out of nowhere, sending Greg into a tailspin, crash landing right in the middle of the untamed African bush. When Greg woke up, he found that his legs looked like used up tubes of toothpaste, so he was essentially trapped right where he was. Arguably worse than that was the fact that Greg was dehydrated before he even took off, hoping to get water at his destination. And just when things looked like they couldn't get any worse, they got worse. A group of elephants showed up and started harassing and straight up stampeding at Greg. With no other option, he starts banging on the wreckage as hard as he could. The elephants went, "Ha!" and decided to leave him alone. He was also approached by a pack of hyenas and actual lionesses on the hunt. But fortunately, animals are all morons, so the same trick worked on them too. Greg spent an entire day and night pinned under the wreckage, fighting off wildlife, severe dehydration, and extreme temperatures before finally being rescued the next morning. Incredibly, after over 100 operations, doctors managed to get Greggy's leggies up and running again. Although he was now 3 inches shorter, which is probably for the best, because now they can just stick the keys to the plane on top of the fridge so he never has another incident like this again. So moral of the story, us humans are resilient creatures who will do anything in our power to survive. And just as Greg Rasmussen banged on his destroyed plane to ward off predators in Zimbabwe, you should bang on your keyboard right now to ward off predators online. With that